There's a certain presence that people across the world describe. Not a ghost, not a dream, but something darker. They don't speak, they don't have faces, and they don't follow the rules of our world. People see them at night, in their doorways, in their wardrobes, in the corner of their rooms when their body is frozen in sleep. They call them shadow people. What are they? Nobody really knows, but the stories are old and they are everywhere. In this video, I'm going to trace some of those stories back to their earliest depictions and then share my own encounters that I've had, because I've had many. Shadow people are commonly described as dark human-shaped presences that appear without clear detail or features. They're most often reported at night during the moments of sleep paralysis or in your peripheral vision. Sleep paralysis is a state during waking up or falling asleep in which a person is conscious but in a complete state of body paralysis. During an episode, the person may hallucinate, which often results in fear. Episodes generally don't last more than a few minutes. Unlike ordinary shadows, they're perceived as having substance, a form that is darker than the surrounding darkness. Reports of shadow people usually describe them as silent, watching, and fleeting, while other accounts portray them as threatening. Others see them as neutral observers or beings that exist on another layer of reality. An example of one of these crazy old stories is about the Old Hag, who's a figure from Newfoundland folklore in Canada and wider European tradition. People describe waking up at night unable to move with a dark human-shaped presence sitting on their chest, choking or suffocating them. There has even been reports of the creature sexually assaulting them, or victims report a crushing weight on their body, difficulty breathing, or overwhelming fear. Many also describe seeing a shadowy woman, often old with indistinct or terrifying features. In Newfoundland, this experience was so common it became known as hag-ridden or simply the Old Hag. The connection to the shadow people is quite clear. Paranormal researchers link the Old Hag to shadow people encounters, especially during sleep paralysis. Scientists explain it as hypogenic hallucinations, the mind half dreaming while the body is still paralyzed in REM sleep. But the consistency of reports across all these cultures makes it one of the strongest examples of how shadow beings show up in human experiences. The people in Newfoundland used to talk about the Old Hag. You'd wake up in the middle of the night completely paralysed with a heavy weight crushing on your chest, and when you'd open your eyes you'd see her. It was this old woman just sitting on top of you, and no matter how hard you tried to scream or move, you couldn't. For some it lasted seconds, and for others it feels like hours. When the hag finally vanished, you were left gasping for breath, unsure if it was a nightmare or had actually happened. My experiences with shadow people mostly happened a couple years ago, maybe 2 or 3 now. It was a strange time in my life because back then I was actually inviting these spirits in. I was opening myself up and asking whatever was around me to show itself. I was basically working on my medium skills and I wanted some paranormal experiences. The place I was living probably did not help to having these experiences because me and my boyfriend were basically squatting in his dad's flat while he was in prison. So this wasn't really the kind of place that you'd feel safe in. So the whole area carried this harsh, heavy energy. It's the kind of environment that already feels haunted or that something's wrong with it before you see anything. I mention this because maybe that's why I was so open and so susceptible at this time to seeing the shadow beings. Because other than this period, I've only ever had one experience before this. But in this flat, the experiences were constant and the encounters were very vivid, just too real. Just, they happened and it's weird to explain that away as maybe I was just daydreaming, I don't know. Now, I don't want to say that shadow people either are automatically bad or evil, because I don't really think that's true. But maybe we'll figure that out together by the end of this video. But here's what I've come to believe. These beings don't follow our rules. They're not bound by human society or human morality. They're more like flies, always there buzzing around in the background, feeding off of something. Maybe that's negative energy or maybe that's dream energy, because I don't know. I only ever saw them at night, in that space between dreaming and waking. And one time when I woke up, I seen a tall shadow figure standing right over my boyfriend as he slept. And the craziest part was because I was exhausted, I just brushed it away with my hand like nothing. Like, I was like, get out of my way. Rolled over and went back to sleep, and then told him in the morning, and he was like, what the fuck? I've always had a high tolerance for paranormal or spooky stuff like that. I'm very fascinated by it, so I'm not always just straight away terrified. So it doesn't exactly shake me, but when I've seen these beings, even half asleep, they just didn't feel like monsters. They felt more like flies. Not pleasant, not exactly welcome, but just not evil either. They just existed on a different layer, peeking into ours whenever they wanted. And when I've seen shadow people, I wasn't always paralysed. Sometimes I could move and I just wasn't fully awake. Some people would say that it means that it's just my dream world leaking into reality, like a glitch in my brain or an overlapping consciousness. But I don't know. To me, I seemed like I was awake. I remember these beings being in the room. Not like how we are, more like how a fly would be in the room with us. I really don't know if that makes sense. They're present, but they exist, reacting and existing on this different level of intelligence. Here's the thing, like, flies are annoying. They feed on waste, spread filth, and even turn into maggots, but it doesn't make them evil. They just live by a different set of rules, and I think shadow beings might be the same. Now, this has always seemed very eerie to me, but I once heard this rule about astral projection, and they basically said don't look directly at the shadow people. If you didn't know, before you astral project, a lot of the times you'll get sleep paralysis. It's not even a lot of the time. I think it's like a definite you'll get sleep paralysis before you astral project if you're awake while you're going into it. You're told not to look at the shadow people that are going to be around you. When you astral project, they tell you that when you first come out of your body, you might see all these shadow people all around you. Just don't look at them. So, of course, the first thing that I did was look at them. And when I looked back, it was almost as if it didn't know that I could see it until that moment. And then that's when reality itself seemed to shift around me. I couldn't move, and I wasn't sure if I was paralysed or just dreaming. But the whole encounter felt off, like my consciousness had slipped into another layer. That flat, for some reason, was the only place where I experienced full-on sleep paralysis. I've never had it since. And whenever it happened, I had this strange way of breaking out of it. I just have to squeeze my eyes tight, super tight, as tight as I can, and it felt like I was falling through my own consciousness, drifting until I could move again, and then when I finally woke up. Sleep paralysis is terrifying. But the more I think about it, the more I wonder if being in that state actually just opens us up, like a doorway, into different realms or dimensions. And maybe that's when we see them, but not because they come to us, but because we're slipping into their space. Not to go too off track, but I honestly believe that skeptics don't experience things like this because they've shut themselves off to it. It's like they're tuned out to the frequency or the level of consciousness that lets you slip into the place where these beings exist. That's a whole thesis for another video, though. The reason all of this was happening to me back then, though, was because I asked for it. I was practicing mediumship at the time, opening myself up, and that meant I was basically inviting a whole new world of encounters onto myself. Here's the question I kept asking myself, though. Do these shadow beings connect with the dead in some way? And the more I think about it, the more I feel like comparing them to flies might not even be accurate. They're more like plants. Alive, interactive in their own way, existing alongside us, but not behaving like people do. They just operate on a different set of rules. Now I can draw conclusions from my own experience and the research that I've done. But I know how these stories about shadow people or any paranormal thing can morph over time, almost like a game of Chinese whispers. So one person's experience shifts a little, and then another, until a whole new story takes form. But what I'm about to tell you, this was real, and it was the single most terrifying paranormal experience I have ever had. And remember I said earlier that this paranormal stuff doesn't really scare me? This one sent me into a full-blown panic attack. So picture this, I'm in my kitchen and my boyfriend's in the living room. I was cooking and I had pepper all over my hands. And in my little ADHD brain, I remember exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking, you throw salt over your shoulder when you spill salt or whatever, like you throw it over your left shoulder. So what do I do with black pepper? Because I had all this pepper on my hands. And I leaned down to put it into the bin, and then that's when it happened. Right in my ear, I heard the deepest, most disgusting, inhuman male scream. Not a yell, not a shout, but a scream. And it froze me to my core. I jumped up and panicked, freaking out. I ran to my boyfriend and I was like, because at this time his dad had come out of prison and he just wasn't living at the flat. I thought his dad had come in and was calling from him from the hallway. I was trying to rationalise it in any way I could. So I kept saying, it's your dad, you have to check. He checked, no one was there. So then I was convinced that someone broke in and I started crying. I was terrified because I knew what I had heard. And I also was so frustrated and so upset because I knew my boyfriend wouldn't believe me. I begged him to check the flat, and then he did, and he didn't find anything. That night I fell asleep shaken, and days later I decided to face it head on. I called out to the spirit and I said, look, I don't want to live here either. So I know this was probably your flat at one point. I know I'm in it now. I don't want to be here. yeah, it's a hard time. So can we just live here together and respect each other? And I swear to God, after that, nothing happened ever again. I call it talking to the universe. You might call me crazy, but when I was asking the universe to show me all these paranormal experiences and all these things happening, I decided to try and connect with like the spirits that maybe could be in the flat. And in my paranormal investigation opinion, I thought it was a woman spirit and I thought it was a woman spirit and a moody old man. This is where it gets fucking crazy, right? So my driving instructor turns up to give me my first lesson and he meets me at the door to like introduce himself, whatever. He tells me, right, these are like 4 flats all right next to each other. They're like house flats, so it's not like a flat block, it's like a house split into 2 flats. And they're both next to each other. Tell me why he told me that years and years ago he used to live directly opposite me, and he told me the people who lived in my flat before me was an old, grumpy, old-ass man and a woman who the woman disappeared one day. He didn't say that she died, but she wasn't there one day, so one could only assume because they were like an old couple. Are you fucking kidding? What are the chances of that happening? I'm just saying, that's all crazy. Like, what are the chances that out of every driving instructor in the world I could have ever picked, it would have been someone that knew the complete lore of all the ghosts that lived in the flat before me? Are you crazy? Literally, when I asked the world to confirm if I was right about these things. Anyway, so that's all fucking crazy. Yeah, so also knowing that and having that as some context, when I was speaking directly to the spirit and I was like, let me live, you know, I was kind of coming from an understanding point. But it never happened again. I know I probably sound crazy, but after that, it stopped. I really don't know what any of this means, and I can only tell you how I felt and what my intuition was at the time. Because honestly, I don't know what to believe. I think that's what energy is at the end of the day, like how we feel, and the way that I felt during these encounters is what shaped how I see them. But what was that spirit that screamed into my ear? Was it bad? Because I don't know, maybe or maybe not. Yeah, I know I'm getting off a bit of theme with the shadow people, but I think they all correlate because it was in the same flat. And it was almost like these shadow people, there was just a negative energy in this flat. I don't know if I think these shadow people are negative or not, but then again, this flat had such a negative energy and maybe they were feeding off that. My ex at the time had nightmares a lot, and I would always see the shadow people hunched over him. So I don't know if it's connected, but it's all interesting. There's loads of mention of these shadow-like people over mythology and history from the last thousands years. There's loads of different depictions where we can almost kind of relate them to the shadow-like phenomenon that we are seeing in this day and age. But one that I found really interesting, that I have my own story that I feel like really ties in with this belief, is something from Inuit mythology. The Tariaksuq. We can play it together. Tariaksuq. And that is probably wrong, but it's from Inuit mythology, and it literally translates to shadow people. Humanoid beings who exist in a parallel hidden world. You can't see them when you look directly at them. Instead, they only appear as shadows, or they vanish entirely. They are said to live lives and hunt like humans, yet remain invisible unless killed, at which point they appear as a half-man, half-deer type creature. This is all crazy, because my first ever shadow encounter, and the only other shadow encounter I've had that hasn't been in that flat, was when I was a kid and I woke up from a nap thinking my sister was watching me, and I seen her like in my wardrobe. I was in the bed, woke up from a nap. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? Went to like hit her and it vanished. And I've always described it the same way. It was like it was never there in the first place. It wasn't like it went into a puff of smoke and just vanished. It wasn't like it disintegrated. It just wasn't there. It was the weirdest thing. And I just kind of shook that one off as, oh, I was asleep, before I knew more about this thing that is happening to everyone.
Wow, I really hope you enjoyed my video. I wish I could make this hours and hours long, because I am a perfectionist and I want to make everything perfect. Like, I had a mermaid documentary in the works. If you follow me on TikTok, you might have heard me talk about it. I don't want to use any of it because it's so in depth. Like, I'm really such a little tryhard. So I'm stopping this here because otherwise I will never upload it. But I hope you enjoyed, and if you enjoyed it, subscribe and comment and like, and I will find the motivation to make more. And I hope if any shadow people visit you, they are nice. Bye!